Lykeion Books presents Saltwater Witch by Chris Howard, Book 1 in the Seaborn Trilogy. Read for you by the author.
Chapter 3 The Girl Who Was Afraid of Water. Cassandra broke through the surface of Red Bear Lake, and for a few seconds didn't know what to do. She shut her eyes against another wave of dizziness and vomited up everything in her stomach. Then her lungs erupted, pasting her tongue to the floor of her mouth. She choked, sucking in water and air that burned in her throat, and then sank into the lake up to her chin. Reaching desperately into the air, Cassandra forced her eyes open. In the last 20 minutes, she had slipped so easily into another world under the water, and now the thin world above seemed harsh and alien, cold and dry against her skin and painfully bright. Water splashed in her face, blinding her. Someone called out, a girl's voice, "Cass!" She spun toward it, clutching madly at the lake's surface. Jill? Nicole? Wherever you found Jillian Cross, Nicole Garcia was never far. The two of them were inseparable. Something hard hit her in the forearm, scraped along to her elbow before she realized what it was. She clutched the oar and managed to get her eyes open. Jill yanked her to the rowboat. "Come on, pull yourself up, girl." Jill's voice had a rough, panicky edge. "Keep your eyes open." Easy for you to say. Cassandra lunged forward, shaking heavy tangles of her hair out of her face. She saw them both now, Jill and Nicole, the closest things she had to friends at Clement's. Kneeling over the boat's side, Jill grabbed her shirt along with a belt loop and pulled her backward against the hull, while Nicole, much stronger than Jill, dug her hands under Cassandra's arms. Together they heaved her into their boat, with Cassandra kicking and gripping the wood rail like a madwoman. The three of them dropped to the benches, arms draped over the sides, gasping for air, and Jill, who never shut up, said between breaths, "Shit, you scared us to death." Nicole recovered first and sat up, throwing the working ends of the oars back into the water and shoving the handles into the locks. "What happened to you?" Cassandra managed to whisper, "I fell in." "Yeah, obviously." Nicole pushed the oars deeper into the water and got them pointed to the shore. "We thought you were—" There was a pause, and then her voice came back scared. "Gone." "Did you come back up for air?" Jill put in hopefully. Nicole drove the oars, glancing over her shoulder at the crowd of St. Clement's girls at the lake's edge, her black braids swinging around her head. "So glad you're alive." The warm wood against her neck, the sunlight on her face. Cassandra closed her eyes, whispering, "Me too." Reaching over Nicole's outstretched legs, Jill pulled at the torn sleeve of Cassandra's shirt. "Tell us what— you're bleeding all over the place." Cassandra twisted sideways, lifting her eyelids for a second, long enough to investigate the damage, then wiped away some of the blood seeping through her shirt, dribbles of it running down her arms. She closed her eyes. "Not enough to kill me." Jill got all motherly, shifted to the same bench seat, pressing her shirt against the cuts on her shoulder to stop the bleeding. "What happened after Deirdre tossed you in?" Cassandra let a few seconds pass, opened one eye to see whether they expected her to answer, then shrugged and felt the cuts in her shoulders pull tight, opening the wounds. Jill and Nicole exchanged worried looks. "Did you stop breathing?" Cassandra's eyes went wide, startled by the question, but she decided she didn't really need to lie. Just be vague. "I don't think so." "Then you must have come back up for air, and we didn't see you." Yeah, she said slowly. "Yeah, I guess." Jill pointed to the road that led through the trees to the picnic area next to the lake. A small fire truck came around the last bend in the road, sirens blaring. "Sirens," Cassandra whispered. "I hear the sirens calling me." Jill gave Nicole another worried look, and Nicole jutted her chin back. "You bail. I'll keep rowing." Cassandra levered her body up and turned to look into the lapping water. Her body was one loose pile of weariness, arms and legs draped over the bench and rail, but there was a roaring race of questions in her head. What the hell just happened? Her life had changed in the last 20 minutes. The world wasn't the same world it had been when she woke that morning. There were pale witches lurking in the muddy bottoms of lakes in Nebraska, and her mother was not a murderer. Nicole pulled in the oars when the boat hit the first boulders, and Matrothy was right there, one hand heavy on Nicole's shoulder, fingers of the other circling Jill's neck as if the director was getting ready to choke her. Both of them looked up, startled. The director kept her voice low. "And you two thought you'd just go out there in a leaky boat and rescue our little troublemaker. Is that it?" Jill looked to Nicole for an answer. "No," Cassandra said firmly. "That's not it." Both Nicole and Jill swung surprised looks toward her because that was exactly it. Matrothy's attention spun on Cassandra like a searchlight in a prison camp. Stunned under the focus, she started stammering words. I asked them to. I paid them." She was digging every dollar and nickel she owned out of the front pocket of her shorts, 7 rolled-up bills, a 10, a 5, several ones, and a handful of loose change. $24.77, every bit of money she had. "I told them I would pay them to look out for me." "How much?" Matrothy sounded mildly suspicious, but it wasn't as if she thought she had caught Cassandra in a lie. It was as if she was intensely curious about what it would take in dollars to get someone to row out to the middle of the lake to save Cassandra. What was her life worth? She uncurled her fingers and showed everyone the wet, wadded-up bills and coins. She shrugged. $25, give or take. Matrothy scowled a moment, not sure if she was being played, and then released Nicole and Jill and grabbed the money out of Cassandra's hand, shoving it all into one of the pockets in her vest. "I'll hold on to that." There was a stunned silence for a few seconds, and then 2 medical technicians shouldered their way through the crowd, throwing a blanket around Cassandra, leading her away by the elbow to level ground next to their truck. Cassandra let her thoughts run their race of questions and speculations while they checked her breathing, flashed bright lights in her eyes, and squeezed her fingernails to see how long it took for the color to return. They made sharp little remarks like, "eyes open to speech," and "withdraws from pain." One of them cut her bra straps and part of the shirt, cleaned and wrapped the torn skin on her shoulders and upper arms. It looked ugly, starting to get pale and shriveled at the edges. Looked as if some carnivore had attacked her. That's sort of the way it went, right? The EMT glanced past her, out at the lake. "How did you cut up your shoulders?" She barely heard him, drifting in her thoughts. But she sat up straight when the other EMT rubbed antiseptic along the inside of her arm, preparing for something intravenous. She'd had enough needles stuck in her today. She shook her head and pulled her arm away. "It'll just sting for a moment." She threw him a "then I'll only sting you for a moment" look. "Come on, it's just—" She tried to stand up. Took her a couple tries. "Get away from me, I'm fine." The cold antiseptic was seeping into her arm, and she rubbed it away, throwing off the blanket. One of the technicians held out his hands, blue-gloved fingers spread. "We're not going to hurt you." She just glared back, fists going tight. "I am going to hurt you." The one with the needle shifted around so that she stood between them. The crowd of St. Clement's girls hemmed them in beyond that. "Please," the EMT tried a calm voice. "Sit down." Looking for a way out, Cassandra said, "Leave me alone." She backed away from the one with the needle. It was clear those words did a lot more under the water than above it. They had no effect on these people. Then Ms. Matrothy pushed her way through the girls, came up behind her, and grabbed her wrist, twisting it into the air. "Hey, that's mine!" Deirdre's indignant shout broke through the murmuring in the crowd. "She stole my bracelet!" The director pulled Cassandra's arm higher, a twist in her joints, and pain shot through her shoulder, along with a warm seep of blood into the bandages. "You took Deirdre's bracelet." There wasn't even a hint of a question in Matrothy's voice. Cassandra shook her head. "It was sinking to the bottom of the lake, and I suppose you kicked and paddled your way down to retrieve it." Cassandra swallowed hard. "Yeah? You can't even wade into water without passing out. Don't play stupid with me, girl. But I was here when they brought you in a dirty blanket." Matrothy's face was turning red. "I've been here every day since. You've been afraid of water since you were 4 years old." That hit her, stopped the questions running in her head. What? Cassandra was going to ask what happened when she was 4, but she had vague, violent memories of what that was about. Matrothi shoving her head against the bottom of the bathtub, soap and water filling her mouth, her lungs, and then getting an ass-kicking afterward for throwing it up all over her. But a more pressing question burst out of Cassandra. Who brought me? Ms. Matrothi, make her give it back, Deirdre's voice interrupted, and the director released Cassandra. Take the bracelet off and return it to Deirdre. Cassandra's face went hot. She hadn't really noticed all the girls from the department gathering so close. They stared at her, and there were even disappointed whispers as she slipped the ring of gold links over her hand. Deirdre snapped it away from her with a sniff. Pathetic criminal, said Matrothi in a low growl. Just like your mother. I'll cut out your tongue! Cassandra screamed the words without thinking, pulling them from somewhere deep and unstable inside. She stepped away from the director, hands out defensively, her wet hair swinging and curling in the air. The crowd of 9 to 16's girls backed away. Even the EMTs tensed up. Get on the bus, Matrothi moved in menacingly, looming over Cassandra, flexing the fingers of one hand and making a fist, pulling at the collar of her old fishing vest with the other, right on the edge of something violent. Then the director reeled it in. She couldn't break any bones in front of the EMTs. Matrothi took them aside, not really lowering her voice, and lied to them about sending Cassandra along to the doctor when they got back to school. Like that's going to happen. They packed up their equipment, and the director returned, crunching across the loose gravel. She pointed at Cassandra, and then at the bus. You will wait in your seat until the rest of us are done having fun. You're dismissed. Cassandra held her psycho mouth tight, turned, and walked across the parking lot, climbed the stairs, and took a seat in the back. Sliding across to the window, she leaned her forehead against the warm glass and stared at the lake through the trees. So tired, so many questions. If she closed her eyes, it felt as if she wouldn't wake for days. Who are you? She whispered the question to the woman whose singing she had heard in the water, not the greenish-looking one with the sharpened teeth. Well, okay, even her. There were no answers, and Cassandra closed her eyes, trying to remember the song. My mother's song. Nothing came to her. Apparently, she was asleep when the fun ended, and the rest of the St. Clement's 9 to 16's boarded. She was completely out through most of the ride back. Pulling up in front of the St. Clement's main entrance, the girls jumped down from the bus, weary after the day at the lake. When they got to the second floor, their dorm hall, it was mostly end-of-the-day activities, flopping exhausted onto beds, some chatting, reading, playing cards or games on phones. Deirdre and her friends threw Cassandra contemptuous looks from the hall's end. Jill, Nicole, and a couple others were sympathetic, but didn't dare show it clearly. Down the row from Cassandra, 4 beds down, a girl was crying about something, and Cassandra felt the girl's tears in the air. The poor thing cried 2 or 3 times a week, sobbing like a baby, and Cassandra had always been considerate, even standing up against girls yelling for her to shut up or grow up. But this was the first time Cassandra could smell and taste the girl's tears in the air. It made her sick to her stomach. So she shoved her head in her pillow, closed her eyes, tried to shut out the world, and the more it intruded, the less it felt like hers, the less it felt as if it had ever been her world.